the most relaxing facts about dreams and memory. Entering the night. Welcome back. Hayasolowo. Or perhaps, if you drifted away somewhere in the gentle hours, welcome again. For the first time, into this quiet space, we are sharing together in the dark. It doesn't matter whether you have been listening all along, or whether sleep took you for a while and has now returned you softly to the edge of waking. No, you are here now, and that is enough. And we will begin again, as we always do, with gentleness and with patience and with no particular urgency at all. In part 1, we wandered through the architecture of dreams, through the mystery of why they dissolve upon waking, through the hidden work of memory consolidation, through the slow and restorative depths of deep sleep, through the extraordinary electrical activity of the dreaming brain, through the chemistry of melatonin and the body's ancient circadian clock, through the seahorse, shaped guardian of episodic memory, and through the quiet, creative poetry of the sleeping imagination. And now, in part 2, we continue our gentle journey, moving deeper into some of the most peaceful and most wondrous aspects of what happens inside the sleeping mind and body. We will explore the emotional intelligence of sleep, the way dreams process grief and fear and love, the neuroscience of nightmares and their surprising purpose, the sleep lives of animals and what they tell us about our own, the role of sleep in learning and creativity, and finally, slowly, softly, completely, we will bring our journey to its restful end. So, settle in REAH. Let your body find whatever position feels most natural, most comfortable, most like rest. Let the weight of the day release, one breath at a time, and allow these words to carry you as gently as a current carries a leaf through the quiet hours of the night. The emotional intelligence of sleep. There is something that sleep does for the emotional life, for the inner world of feeling and response and interpretation. That is subtle, and important, and, when you really consider it, quite beautiful. Something that goes well beyond the simple resetting of alertness that we usually think of when we think about the benefits of rest. Sleep, REM sleep in particular, has been shown to function as a kind of emotional processing system, a nightly therapy session that the brain runs on itself, without any therapist, without any words, without any conscious effort or intention. During REM sleep, the brain revisits the emotional experiences of the day, The moments of frustration, of worry, of sadness, of joy, of connection, of loss, and does something quite remarkable with them. It replays them in an environment in which norepinephrine, the stress-related neurochemical, is almost entirely absent. Matthew Walker, a neuroscientist at the University of California, Berkeley, and author of one of the most widely read books on sleep science, has described this process as overnight therapy. The emotional content of an experience, the feeling attached to the memory, is, over the course of REM sleep, gradually decoupled from the factual content. The event is remembered, but its emotional charge is reduced to nope. The wound is not erased, but it is cleaned and bandaged and given space to begin its quiet healing. This is why things that feel enormous and catastrophic in the late evening often seem more manageable in the morning. This is why the old advice to sleep on a difficult decision, to wait before sending an angry message, to let a night pass before responding to something that has upset you, has a genuine neurological basis. The brain is not simply distracting itself from the problem by sleeping. It is actively working on it, processing the emotional charge, integrating the experience, and returning it in the morning in a form that the rational, daylight mind can engage with more clearly. Studies have found that people who are deprived of REM sleep specifically, even while being allowed to sleep during non-REM stages, show significantly reduced ability to accurately read other people's emotional expressions. They become less sensitive to the subtle signals in a face, less able to detect fear or sadness or discomfort in the people around them, less emotionally attuned, less socially perceptive, as if the overnight recalibration of the emotional system has not occurred, leaving the person navigating the social world with instruments that are slightly out of adjustment. Conversely, people who sleep well, who get sufficient, uninterrupted REM sleep, tend to show greater emotional resilience, greater flexibility in responding to stress, greater capacity for empathy, greater ability to regulate their own emotional responses rather than being swept away by them. Sleep is not merely good for the body and the mind in the mechanical sense. It is good for the heart, for the quality of feeling and relating and understanding that makes human life rich and connected and meaningful. There is also evidence that sleep plays a role in the processing of positive emotions, not just the negative ones. After REM sleep, the brain's reward circuitry shows enhanced sensitivity to pleasant experiences. Pleasures feel more pleasurable. Beauties feel more beautiful. Connections feel more connecting, as if the nightly reset restores a kind of emotional freshness, an openness to experience that accumulates fatigue under the weight of waking and is only renewed in sleep. And so every night that you sleep well, every night that you allow your body and your brain to move through their full, natural cycle of rest, you are investing not just in your health and your memory and your cognitive function, but in your capacity to feel, to connect, to find beauty, to love, to be present, fully and openly, in the life that awaits you when morning comes. And so every night that you sleep well, every night that you allow your body and your brain to move through their full, natural cycle of rest, you are investing not just in your health and your memory and your cognitive function, but in your capacity to feel awe, to connect, to find beauty, to love all, to be present, fully and openly, in the life that awaits you when morning comes. Nightmares and their surprising purpose. Let us speak very softly and very carefully, or about something that is a natural and important part of the dream life. Something that most of us have experienced, and that can feel, in the moment of experiencing it, alarming and distressing, and yet which serves, in most cases, a purpose that is genuinely and unexpectedly meaningful. Let us speak about nightmares. A nightmare is, at its most basic, a dream with a strongly negative emotional tone. A dream that generates fear, dread, anxiety, grief, or some other form of distress that is intense enough to wake the dreamer or to leave a significant emotional residue upon waking. Nightmares occur during REM sleep, as all vivid dreams do, and they are experienced by virtually everyone at some point, most commonly during childhood, though they are by no means absent from adult life. The question of why we have nightmares, what function they serve, if any, has occupied dream researchers for many years, and the most compelling and most widely supported current answer is one that is genuinely reassuring. Nightmares may be the brain's way of processing and rehearsing threatening or frightening experiences in a safe context. A way of confronting fear within the protected space of sleep, where the dreamer cannot be actually harmed by whatever they are confronting. This theory, sometimes called the threat simulation theory, was developed by Finnish psychologist Ante Revonsuo, who proposed that the primary biological function of dreaming was to simulate threatening events and practice responses to them. In our evolutionary past, and still, in many ways, in our present, the ability to recognize and respond quickly to threats was essential for survival, and the dream state, which activates the threat detection systems of the brain with full emotional realism, but without real world consequences may have been a way of maintaining and sharpening those systems, a kind of safety drill run nightly in the private theater of sleep. This helps explain why nightmares are particularly common in people who are experiencing significant stress, anxiety, or trauma. The brain is working harder during these periods to process and integrate threatening material. And the dream state is the arena in which that processing most readily occurs. Nightmares in the context of trauma, such as those experienced in post-traumatic stress disorder, are more intense and more repetitive than ordinary nightmares, and they represent, in an important sense, the brain attempting, again and again, to process an experience that is still too raw and too overwhelming to be fully integrated. There is a form of therapy for trauma-related nightmares called image rehearsal therapy, which involves the dreamer choosing a recurring nightmare and, in waking life, rewriting its ending, changing it deliberately and consciously into a less frightening version, and then rehearsing this new ending mentally before sleep. Research has found that this technique can significantly reduce the frequency and intensity of trauma nightmares, and that the brain appears willing and able to integrate the consciously altered script into the dreaming narrative. For most people, most of the time, ordinary nightmares, the ones that come with periods of stress, illness, certain medications, or simply the fluctuations of ordinary life, are not cause for concern. They are the brain doing its difficult but important work, processing fear in the dark so that the waking self can meet the world with a little more steadiness and a little more resilience. And there is something tender about this when you really sit with it, slow, even in the frightening dream, even in the nightmare, with its chasing shadows and its impossible predicaments. The brain is trying to help you. It is, in its own strange and vivid language, attending to something that matters, something that you feel, that you carry, that needs to be heard and processed and gently released. So if you wake tonight from a dream that troubled you, allow yourself simply to notice that you are safe, that the darkness around you is quiet and familiar, that your body is resting in its warm place, and that your brain, in its wisdom and its care, was simply doing what it knows how to do, tending to you, in the only way available to it at that hour. With dream, the sleep lives of animals, we are not alone in our sleeping. Slow, across the living world, from the microscopic to the enormous, from the ancient to the newly evolved, creatures of every kind surrender to sleep, and the variety of ways in which they do so is, when considered quietly and carefully, among the most charming and most calming facts in all of biology. Dolphins sleep with one eye open, literally, in a process called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep. The dolphin allows one half of its brain to enter the quiet, restorative depths of sleep while the other half remains awake and alert, monitoring the environment, maintaining breathing, watching for danger. The two halves take turns, switching every few hours, so that the whole brain receives its rest over the course of a day. But never all at once, never at the cost of awareness. It is perhaps the most elegant solution to the problem of sleeping in an ocean that any creature has ever devised. Migratory birds face a similar challenge when a bar-tailed godwit flies from Alaska to New Zealand. A non-stop journey of 11,000 kilometers, the longest non-stop flight of any bird. It cannot simply land and sleep when it becomes tired. There is no land on which to land, no safe resting place in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And yet, remarkably, these birds appear to engage in microsleep during flight, tiny episodes of sleep lasting only seconds, cycling through one hemisphere at a time, maintaining the ability to fly while nonetheless allowing the brain to rest. The miracle of migration, it turns out, is also the miracle of sleeping while moving through the sky. Sperm whales sleep in a manner that seems almost impossibly peaceful. A pod of sleeping sperm whales floats vertically in the ocean, their massive bodies drifting just below the surface, heads pointing upward toward the air. They breathe once every 15 minutes or so, rising briefly to the surface and then sinking again, motionless, into the blue. Scientists who first observed this behavior by approaching the sleeping pod very slowly and very quietly by boat, described an atmosphere of profound stillness, of immense creatures at absolute rest, the ocean holding them gently, as if in enormous liquid arms. Elephants sleep for surprisingly short periods, only 3 to 4 hours per night in the wild, and sometimes going without sleep for 2 days or more when traveling long distances. When they do sleep, they often do so standing up, leaning against each other or against trees. Their weight supported by their extraordinary physiology. But deep sleep, which elephants do occasionally enter, lying fully on their sides, is rare enough in the wild that observers consider it a privilege to witness. Horses, too, can sleep standing, resting lightly, in a state of drowsy alertness, using a passive stay apparatus in their legs that allows them to lock their joints and remain upright without muscular effort. But for the deeper stages of sleep, horses must lie down, and they do so only when they feel genuinely safe, when the environment is familiar, when they are in the company of other horses they trust, when the world feels quiet enough to allow the vulnerability of lying down. The humble fruit fly, Drosophila melanogaster, a tiny insect that has been one of the most productive subjects of biological research for over a century, sleeps. It becomes inactive at night. It shows reduced responsiveness to stimulation, and if it is deprived of sleep, it compensates by sleeping more in the following period, just as a sleep-deprived human would. This conservation of sleep across such vastly different kinds of life, from a fruit fly to a sperm whale, suggests that sleep's functions so fundamental, so deeply embedded in the biology of living things, that evolution has preserved it across hundreds of millions of years of divergence. Sleep and the architecture of learning, educational but dreamy. This section confirms that sleep is productive, reassuring for listeners. If you have ever stayed up late to study for and hope to prepare for an important task, sacrificing sleep in that the extra hours allow for the lost rest, you may already have a sense compensate for the lost rest. From experience, that this strategy does not quite work as intended. That the material read at 2 in the morning, with heavy eyes and a flagging mind, does not stick in the way that material read in the afternoon, with a fresh and rested brain, tends to do. And you would be right, not merely by impression, but by the evidence of considerable research. The relationship between sleep and learning is one of the most robustly supported findings in sleep science, and it operates at every stage of the learning process before, during, and after. Before learning, in the hours and days leading up to a new learning experience, sleep prepares the brain to receive and encode new information. The hippocampus, that faithful seahorse-shaped archivist, is essentially refreshed during sleep, its temporary storage cleared and reorganized, making room for the new arrivals of the following day. Research has found that a single night of total sleep deprivation reduces the brain's capacity to form new memories by approximately 40%, a staggering reduction that no amount of caffeine or motivation can accurately compensate for. During learning itself, in the waking hours of engagement with new material, the brain lays down initial traces of experience. But these traces are fragile at first, vulnerable to interference and forgetting, not yet woven into the stable fabric of long-term memory. They exist in the first hours after learning, like wet ink on paper, present but easily smeared. Sleep, coming after learning, is when those traces are set, when the ink dries, when the memory is transformed from a fragile, recent impression into a stable and retrievable part of the long-term store. The sharp wave ripples of the hippocampus carry the day's learning to the cortex. The slow oscillations of deep sleep coordinate and synchronize this transfer. And with each cycle of sleep, the memory becomes a little more solid, a little more integrated, a little more fully yours. Motor learning, the kind involved in developing physical skills, like playing a musical instrument or learning a sport or practicing any kind of coordinated movement, appears to benefit particularly from the NREM sleep stages. Studies of people learning finger tapping sequences or piano music or complex movements have found consistent improvement after sleep. Not just from the rest itself, but specifically from the neural consolidation that occurs during the sleep period. Movements that were effortful and inconsistent before sleep become smoother and more automatic after it. There is a beautiful phrase in neuroscience: offline processing, which refers to the brain's capacity to continue working on problems and integrating information during sleep, without any conscious effort or direction from the sleeper. It is called offline because it happens when the brain is, in some sense, disconnected from the continuous stream of sensory input and social demand that characterizes waking life, free to focus undisturbed on its own internal work. This offline processing is thought to underlie the phenomenon of sleeping on a problem and waking with the answer, a phenomenon that most people have experienced at least once in their lives. The student who goes to bed unable to solve a mathematics problem and wakes with the solution clear in their mind. The writer who falls asleep blocked and wakes with the next line of the poem already formed. The engineer who dreams the mechanism and wakes to find that the dream was right. These are not magical events. They are the natural consequence of a sleeping brain that continues to work, not on the logical, step-by-step work of conscious problem solving, but on the associative, pattern-finding, connection-making work that REM sleep in particular seems to excel at. Finding links between distant concepts, recognizing structures hidden within complexity, making the kind of creative leaps that, in waking life, we might call inspiration. Herr SL and so the most productive thing you can do tonight for everything you are trying to learn, to understand, to create, is also the simplest and the most natural and the most ancient thing imaginable. Close your eyes, let the world go, and sleep. The chemistry of dreams, acetylcholine and serotonin, behind every dream, behind every vivid image and strange landscape and emotionally resonant scene that the sleeping brain produces. There are molecules tiny chemical messengers moving between neurons, opening doors and closing others, shaping the quality and the character of the dreaming experience in ways that are only beginning to be understood. The neurotransmitter most closely associated with REM sleep and with dreaming is acetylcholine, a small molecule that has been present in nervous systems for hundreds of millions of years, one of the oldest chemical signals in the history of animal life. During REM sleep, the neurons that produce acetylcholine become highly active, releasing this chemical throughout the brain in what researchers call an acetylcholine flood. And it is this chemical environment, this particular neurochemical signature, that appears to be essential for the generation of the vivid, emotionally rich, narratively complex experiences we call dreams. Acetylcholine is thought to play several key roles in REM sleep. It activates the visual cortex, generating the imagery of dreams. It engages the limbic system, infusing the dream with emotional tone and significance, or it suppresses the production of norepinephrine and serotonin, those two neurotransmitters that are active during waking and that, in their absence, allow the dreaming brain to operate with its characteristic looseness and freedom. Its willingness to make strange connections, to ignore the rules of logic and physics and social convention, to be, in the fullest sense, imaginative. Serotonin, which is abundant and active during waking, associated with mood, with the sense of well-being and of the world being manageable and coherent, is at its lowest levels during REM sleep, and this reduction is part of what gives dreaming its particular quality, its departure from the linear, logical, cause and effect narrative of waking experience. When serotonin is withdrawn, the brain's natural tendency toward order and coherence is relaxed and something more associative, more symbolic, more fundamentally free takes its place. This is, interestingly, one of the proposed mechanisms by which certain psychedelic compounds produce their effects. By temporarily suppressing serotonin activity in specific regions of the brain, they create a waking state that shares some qualities with the dreaming state. The loosening of boundaries, the intensification of visual experience, the tendency toward unusual connections and associations. In this sense, dreams may be, as some researchers have suggested, a natural psychedelic experience that the brain produces for itself every night, without any external chemical assistance. The neurotransmitter dopamine, associated with reward, motivation, pleasure, and the anticipation of good things, also plays a role in the dream state. Dopamine appears to be involved in the generation of the emotional intensity of dreams, and in the vivid sense of reward or threat that dream experiences can carry. Some researchers have proposed that the dreaming brain may use dopamine-mediated simulations as a way of testing and rehearsing responses to rewarding or threatening scenarios, building and maintaining the neural pathways that will be needed for navigating the real versions of such situations in waking. GBA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, is the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, responsible for the general dampening of neural activity that allows the brain to rest and sleep. It is GABA that enables the slow wave of deep sleep to flow across the brain, quieting the noise of daytime activity and allowing the deep, restorative stillness of N3. The familiar experience of feeling one's thoughts slow and simplify as sleep approaches. The sense of the mind becoming gentler, less sharp, less busy, is, in part, the experience of GBA at work. All of this chemistry, all these molecules, these tiny, ancient signals moving through the living darkness of the sleeping brain, are happening in you right now or will be very soon. They require nothing of you. No effort, no attention, no understanding. They simply happen as they have happened every night of your life. Quietly, faithfully, with extraordinary precision and extraordinary care. The sleep stages, a full night's journey, a narrative and flowing. Map the night as a journey through landscapes. Let us trace, very gently and very completely, the full arc of a night's sleep, from the moment of lying down and closing your eyes to the soft return of morning consciousness. Because the journey, when seen whole, is one of the most quietly remarkable things that a human body can do. In the minutes after lying down, as the room darkens and the sounds of the waking world begin to fade, the brain begins its transition from beta waves to alpha waves. The thinking mind quiets. The stream of internal commentary slows. The eyes, behind closed lids, begin to roll slowly upward and to the sides in the characteristic movement of drowsiness. You are at the threshold of sleep. Then comes stage 1, called N1, the lightest stage of non-REM sleep, lasting only a few minutes, a soft anteroom to the deeper stages. In N1, the brain transitions to theta waves. The muscles may experience that gentle twitching we know as hypnic jerks, and the dreamy, loosely associative thoughts of hypnagogia may begin to drift through the mind. Images and sounds and half-formed ideas that belong to neither sleep nor waking, but to the beautiful, ambiguous space between them. From N1, the brain descends into stage 2, N2, which is where much of an ordinary night's sleep is actually spent, comprising roughly 45 to 55% of total sleep time. N2 is characterized by two particular patterns of neural activity. Sleep spindles. Brief bursts of high-frequency brain activity, lasting only a second or two, thought to play a role in memory consolidation and in protecting sleep from disturbance. And K. complexes. Large, sharp waves that appear in response to external stimuli as the sleeping brain briefly processes, but then dismisses the information, maintaining sleep without waking. A full night of sleep typically contains 4 to 6 of these 90-minute cycles, each one bringing the brain through its own miniature version of the night's journey. Light sleep, deep sleep, dreaming, and each one contributing something different and something essential to the overall work of restoration. The early cycles, rich in deep sleep, are essential for physical repair and memory transfer. The later cycles, rich in REM, are essential for emotional processing, creative integration, and the long, flowing dreams that make the sleeping mind feel, when remembered, like a whole other life. And as you lie here now, perhaps already halfway through your own night's journey, know that your brain is moving through these stages as it always has and always will, descending and ascending, cycling through the territories of sleep with the faithfulness and the precision of something very ancient and very wise, doing exactly what it was made to do, carrying you gently through the dark. Memory across a lifetime, from infancy to age. We are born into sleep. In the womb, in the final months before birth, the developing fetus spends the vast majority of its time in a state resembling REM sleep, cycling through active sleep with its flickering eye movements and its bursts of limb movement every 20 to 30 minutes. Hours and hours of dreaming, or something that functions like dreaming, before the brain has had a single waking experience to dream about. What is a fetus dreaming of in those dark and liquid hours before birth? The question is unanswerable, and yet somehow moving, perhaps nothing that we would recognize as a dream. No narratives, no characters, no landscapes, but simply the raw electrical activity of a developing brain running through its nascent circuits, testing and strengthening and building the neural architecture that will be needed for a lifetime of experience, practicing the fundamental patterns of neural firing that will eventually produce consciousness itself. Newborn babies spend approximately 16 to 18 hours a day asleep, an astonishing proportion by adult standards. And roughly half of that sleep is REM sleep, which represents a proportion of REM that the adult brain never again achieves. This extraordinary investment in the dreaming state during infancy is thought to reflect the extraordinary pace of brain development during this period. Synapses forming by the millions, circuits being laid down and refined, the architecture of a human mind being built from the inside out in the silent hours of sleep. As children grow, total sleep time gradually decreases, and the proportion of REM sleep within the total also declines. But children continue to require, and generally to achieve, when allowed to, significantly more sleep than adults. School-age children need 9 to 11 hours. Adolescents, who are experiencing a second great wave of brain development, a restructuring of the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system that will produce the adult personality, require 8 to 10 hours and tend, for genuine biological reasons, to feel more alert in the late evening and more groggy in the early morning. A pattern that conflicts notoriously and unfortunately with the schedules of most educational systems. In adulthood, in the long middle stretch of life, most people function best on 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, though individual variation is real and significant, and a small percentage of the population appears to be genuinely well, served by somewhat less. The idea, however, still surprisingly widespread, that one can adapt to chronic sleep deprivation, that the body eventually gets used to it and performs normally on too little sleep, has not been supported by research. What the research consistently shows is that people who are chronically sleep deprived lose insight into their own impairment. They feel, subjectively, that they are doing fine, but objective measures of cognitive performance show otherwise. In older age, the architecture of sleep changes in ways that are significant, but not catastrophic. The proportion of deep, slow, wave sleep declines markedly. Sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented, more easily disrupted by noise or discomfort or the need to use the bathroom. The circadian rhythm shifts earlier, so that older adults tend to feel sleepy earlier in the evening and wake earlier in the morning. And the total time spent in sleep tends to decrease somewhat, though the need for sleep does not decrease in parallel, which means that older adults are often not getting quite as much sleep as they require. Despite these changes, the sleeping brain of an older person retains all its fundamental capacity for memory consolidation, emotional processing, and physical restoration. It simply accomplishes these things in a lighter, more fragmented, perhaps less efficient way than in youth. And there is growing evidence that protecting and improving sleep quality in older age, through attention to sleep hygiene, to light exposure, to the rhythms of activity and rest, can have significant benefits for cognitive health, for memory, and for the general quality of both sleeping and waking life. Has do from womb to old age. From the first flicker of fetal REM to the last quiet night of a long life, sleep accompanies us, faithful and present through every season of experience, changing its shape and its character as we change, but never abandoning us, never ceasing to offer its gifts of restoration and of rest. In older age, the architecture of sleep changes in ways that are significant, but not catastrophic. The proportion of deep, slow, wave sleep declines markedly. Sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented, more easily disrupted by noise or discomfort or the need to use the bathroom. The circadian rhythm shifts earlier, so that older adults tend to feel sleepy earlier in the evening and wake earlier in the morning. And the total time spent in sleep tends to decrease somewhat, though the need for sleep does not decrease in parallel, which means that older adults are often not getting quite as much sleep as they require. Despite these changes, the sleeping brain of an older person retains all its fundamental capacity for memory consolidation, emotional processing, and physical restoration. It simply accomplishes these things in a lighter, more fragmented, perhaps less efficient way than in youth, and there is growing evidence that protecting and improving sleep quality in older age, through attention to sleep hygiene, to light exposure, to the rhythms of activity and rest, can have significant benefits for cognitive health, for memory, and for the general quality of both sleeping and waking life. Has do from womb to old age. From the first flicker of fetal REM to the last quiet night of a long life, sleep accompanies us, faithful and present through every season of experience, changing its shape and its character as we change, but never abandoning us, never ceasing to offer its gifts of restoration and of rest. The neuroscience of forgetting. Why forgetting is a feature, not a bug. Philosophical and reassuring. Reframe forgetting as mercy and wisdom. We live in a culture that tends to value memory, to treat it as something precious, something to be preserved and protected and strengthened, and forgetfulness as something to be feared, remedied, overcome, something that represents loss or weakness or the first signs of decline. And there is, of course, a kind of forgetting that is genuinely distressing. The forgetting of a loved one's face, the loss of language, the erosion of identity that can accompany serious neurological disease. Those are real losses, and they deserve to be taken seriously. But most forgetting, the ordinary, daily, unremarkable forgetting of names and faces, and where you put your keys and what you had for lunch 3 Tuesdays ago, is not a failure. It is a feature. It is the brain doing something that it was designed to do, and doing it well, and doing it in service of something important. George Louis Borges wrote a haunting short story called Founs the Memorious, about a young man who, after an injury, develops perfect, absolute, total memory. He remembers every leaf on every tree he has ever seen, every cloud formation, every conversation, every sensation, with complete and unwavering fidelity. And far from being a gift, this total recall is a prison. The man is crushed under the weight of everything he has ever experienced. What? Unable to generalize, unable to abstract, unable to function in the world that ordinary forgetting makes navigable. Borges understood something that neuroscience has since confirmed, that the ability to forget is as important as the ability to remember, that a mind which retained everything with equal fidelity would be buried under the noise of its own experience. Unable to find the signal, forgetting is, in this sense, a form of editing, of choosing, automatically and unconsciously, what matters enough to keep and what can be safely released. The brain performs this editing continuously, during waking, through the process of synaptic competition, in which frequently used connections are strengthened and rarely used ones are weakened. And during sleep, through the process of synaptic homeostasis, in which the overall level of synaptic strength is reset overnight, allowing the brain to begin each day with the capacity to form new connections, to learn new things, to respond to new experiences without being constrained by the accumulated weight of all previous ones. There is also evidence that forgetting plays a protective, emotional role, that the natural fading of memories, particularly distressing memories, over time is part of how the mind heals itself from difficult experiences. That the process of forgetting, when it works well, allows painful experiences to recede gradually from the sharp, vivid foreground of consciousness into the softer background of history, all still present, still accessible, but no longer dominating the field of attention in the way that raw, recent trauma can. Sleep contributes to this emotional editing through the REM sleep processing we described earlier. The overnight decoupling of emotional charge from factual memory, and through the natural process of memory reconsolidation, by which each time a memory is retrieved, it becomes briefly malleable again, open to modification, to integration with new understanding, to the gentle revisions that time and perspective bring, before being stored again in a slightly updated form. Memory is not a recording, and forgetting is not its enemy. They are two aspects of the same living, dynamic process, the process by which experience is transformed into understanding, by which the past is digested and integrated and made part of the self without overwhelming it wall, by which the sleeping mind tends, night after night, to the garden of all that has been lived, keeping what blooms, releasing what has finished, making room for what is yet to come. Husobo, and perhaps there is comfort in that, comfort in knowing that not everything needs to be held, that the mind, in its wisdom, knows what to keep and what to let go, and that the letting go, gentle, quiet, happening while you sleep, is also a kind of grace. Dreams across cultures, the universal inner world warm and expansive. This section is about shared humanity. Let it feel unifying, hey? For as long as human beings have been human, for as long as we have been telling stories about ourselves and to each other, we have been telling stories about our dreams. Dreams appear in the oldest written records in human history. In the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia, where Gilgamesh dreams of his companion Enkidu before meeting him. In the Vedic scriptures of ancient India, which devote entire passages to the interpretation of dreams and their spiritual significance. In the Hebrew Bible, where Joseph's dreams of 7 fat cows and 7 thin cows shape the destiny of nations. In the Egyptian Book of Dreams, written nearly 4,000 years ago, which catalogs hundreds of dream scenarios and their proposed meanings. Ancient Greece gave us 2 gates of dreams, the gate of horn, through which true and prophetic dreams pass, the ones that show what will come to pass, and the gate of ivory, through which false and deceptive dreams pass, the ones that merely feel meaningful, but signify nothing. The distinction was a way of grappling with a question that still occupies philosophers and psychologists today. Which of our inner experiences can be trusted, and which are merely the brain talking to itself in the dark? In many indigenous cultures around the world, dreams are understood not as private experiences of a single mind, but as communications from ancestors, from spirits, from the land itself. The Iroquois Confederacy of North America held dream councils, communal gatherings in which tribe members shared their dreams and worked together to understand and enact what the dreams were asking for. Dreams were seen not as personal, but as social, as messages that belonged to the community and carried obligations toward it. In Aboriginal Australian traditions, the concept of the dreaming, or dream time, refers to something far vaster than any individual's nightly experience. It is a dimension of existence in which the creative acts that formed the world still continue, a realm that is accessible through ceremony, through story, through the songs that trace the paths of ancestral beings across the landscape. The dreaming is not the past. It is not historical. It is an ongoing reality that underlies and interpenetrates the everyday world, accessible to those who know how to listen. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist whose work has been enormously influential in shaping Western attitudes toward dreams, believed that the dream was the royal road to the unconscious, not the personal unconscious of repressed individual experience, as Freud proposed, but a deeper layer he called the collective unconscious, a shared pool of images, symbols, and patterns, which he called archetypes, that are present in all human minds, regardless of culture, regardless of time, regardless of individual history. The evidence for Jung's specific theoretical framework is debated, but the observation at its core that certain images and themes appear in dreams across cultures and across centuries with remarkable consistency is well documented. The experience of flying, of being chased, of appearing in public without clothes, of teeth falling out, of being late for something important, of finding oneself in an unknown building full of unexplored rooms. These themes appear in the dreams of people across the world. In cultures that have had no contact with each other, in people whose waking lives are as different as lives can be. This cross-cultural consistency suggests that something in the structure of the dreaming brain, in the way the sleeping mind processes experience and generates imagery, is shared across all of humanity. That beneath the enormous diversity of culture and language and history, there is an inner world that we hold in common, that the sleeping mind, in all its strangeness and all its beauty, is one of the places where we are most fundamentally alike. Yes, oh. And there is something very peaceful about that. BREH, to know that tonight, as you drift into your own private dream, somewhere across the world, in a city or a village or a field beneath the open sky, someone else is drifting too into their own dream, perhaps dreaming something that rhymes in its quiet imagery with yours. Both of you held in the same vast, ancient human darkness, and both of you, in your sleep, briefly touching the same deep ground. The gift of rest on trusting sleep there is in modern life. A complicated relationship with rest, a tendency to feel that not doing is a kind of failure, that stillness is wasted time, that the hours of sleep could, perhaps, be better used. And this relationship, which is culturally specific and historically recent, a product of industrialization and the tyranny of productivity, has led, in much of the world, to a chronic and serious undersleeping, to alarm clocks set too early and beds entered too late, and the quiet, compounding cost of a body and a brain not given what they need. But consider what you now know. Consider the extraordinary intelligence that the sleeping brain brings to bear on the task of restoration. Consider the memory consolidation that happens without your participation. The emotional processing that occurs without your direction. The physical repair that requires no conscious effort on your part whatsoever. The glymphatic cleansing, the hormonal release, the synaptic pruning, the creative integration, the deep wave of restoration that moves through you in the dark. Sleep is not inactivity. It is the most complex and the most comprehensive form of self-care that the human body performs. It is the brain at its most generative, its most restorative, its most fundamentally alive, and it asks almost nothing of you in return. Only that you give it the time, and the darkness, and the quiet, and the permission to do what it knows how to do. Trusting sleep, allowing yourself to rest without guilt, without the nagging feeling that you should be doing something more, is, in a deep sense, an act of wisdom. It is the recognition that the body knows things the mind does not, that the ancient rhythms of rest and waking are not obstacles to a productive life, but the very ground on which a good life is built. The researchers who study sleep are, almost without exception, people who have come to feel a kind of reverence for it, who find, in the science of sleep, something that is not merely interesting, but genuinely moving. A reminder that beneath the business and the noise of human life, there is this, the sleeping body, the dreaming mind, the faithful brain working through the night to care for the person it belongs to. The ancient ritual of rest that connects us to every creature that has ever lived, and to every human being who has ever lain down in the dark and allowed the world to go away for a while. You are part of that ritual tonight, as you have been every night of your life, and as you will be, we hope, with gentleness and with kindness toward yourself, for many nights to come. Hey, SLOU, there is nothing you need to do now, nothing you need to think or plan or remember or resolve. The night is long and quiet and safe, and your brain, your extraordinary, faithful, tireless brain, knows exactly what to do with it. Good night and deeper rest. Hushi SOW, absolute minimum pace. This is the send off into sleep. Speak as if the listener is already almost gone. And so we arrive, at last, at the gentle end of our journey. SLOW, 2 parts of wandering through the quiet science of dreams and memory, through the beautiful, intricate, deeply human world that the sleeping mind inhabits every night, and through the many ways, both ancient and newly understood, in which sleep cares for us, holds us restores us to ourselves. We have learned that dreams are not random. They are the brain's language for processing emotion, for rehearsing experience, for making the creative connections that daylight cannot always reach. We have learned that memory is not a recording, but a living thing, reconstructed, refined, and tended through the hours of sleep with a patience and a care that the waking mind could never quite replicate. We have learned that the sleeping brain is not absent or idle. It is alive with a different kind of living, electric with the slow wave and the REM burst, awash in the chemistry of restoration, doing, in the dark, the most important work of a human life. We have learned that we are not alone in our sleeping, that every creature in the living world rests in its own way, in the generous dark, that sleep connects us to something far older and far larger than any individual life, that in lying down and letting go, we are joining a ritual as ancient as life itself, and we have learned, perhaps most importantly, that rest is not weakness. It is not waste. It is not the absence of productivity, but its source, that the sleeping hours are not lost hours, but found ones. Hours in which the brain becomes more fully itself, the body more fully restored, the self more fully prepared for whatever the morning will bring. BREH. So now, let these words dissolve into the quiet. Let the thoughts that have been gently accompanying you through this night become softer and softer until they are only the faintest murmur at the very edge of consciousness. Let your body sink just a little more into whatever is supporting it right now. Feel the weight of your limbs, the warmth of the space around you, the slow, even rhythm of your breathing in and out. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to hold. The night is yours, completely and entirely yours, though. A long, dark, generous space of rest that asks nothing of you, except this, that you let it carry you. Has-L-O. And as your breathing slows, let these peaceful facts carry you into deep, restful sleep. You can let go now. The universe is gently holding you. Has-S-L-O. Rest deeply, my friend. Good night.